today. Today's topic is van life for beginners, how I began my van life journey. So I'm going to do a screen share here, and let's see if anyone's here in chat yet. Cool. Okay, so all right, we don't need to see that. So I want to show you a few pictures here. So this tree here signifies part of the beginning of my van life journey, and I'll explain shortly. And also, I know it's a funny butt shot, but there I am painting the roof of my evergreen, dark green van white. So that is how I started my van life. But let me beginning. So way back in, I think it was December of 2012, I had been doing research about building my own tiny house on wheels, building and living out of a tiny house on wheels. So I researched, and I stumbled across Bob Wells on YouTube, and also Bob Wells' blog. If you don't know who Bob Wells is, he has a very famous nomadic blog called Cheap RV Living. And it's really a one-stop shop for anyone looking to learn to be fully nomadic, living out of any kind of vehicle or RV. So I initially stumbled across van life, and at first I thought, no way of living out of a van. That's too small of a space for me. I just can't do that. But after a few weeks, it started to grow on me. And finally, I got it in my mind that, yes, I am absolutely going to live out of a van. So I went on Bob's Cheap RV Living forum, which I want to show that to you real quick here. It's actually, I don't even think he has his forum anymore. I was looking for it. The only thing I see is the Cheap RV Living blog. And I know that one of his longtime friends actually bought the blog and took over it. But this is where everything started for me, was this website. So they used to have, it used to be a very, 90-ish looking website. Now it's like updated. And so community events, I'm trying to see if they have the forum still. I see a store, gatherings. Yeah, I may have heard that they removed the forum. Bob pretty much does a lot of his stuff on YouTube now. And, I think the YouTube comments area kind of acts as a forum. And they also have yearly gatherings. They have a community event. They have the Rubber Tramp Rendezvous and the Women's RTR. So I had read about that, and I was determined to get a van, like so many other van lifers. They start off this way. They stumble across Bob Wells' website, or now they just go on YouTube. They stumble across him on YouTube through YouTube searches. But let's just have a look at his YouTube channel. So here it is. And this is what Bob Wells looks like if you haven't seen him before. But I don't even think he had a YouTube channel. But here you can see all the different videos. So he basically just helps people that, mainly his focus is helping low-income people that can't afford housing move their life into any type of vehicle and live a happy, exciting, adventurous life traveling full-time. So he teaches people how to do that. So golly, he's not even doing his, let me see, hang on a second. I was trying to see if he has an active, here we go. So this is Bob's new community area. So this is kind of like, I wouldn't say it's a forum, but yeah. So just check out his site if you're considering beginning van life or living out of any type of vehicle. This is how I began my van life, was studying his book. And I'll actually show you the book that I started with. Let me just stop screen sharing for a moment. And I'm bringing up Kindle, and I will show you the book that convinced me. Oh, it might not. Let me see. Hang on. Entire screen. Okay. So I don't know if this is going to work. Unable to share the screen. Share screen, home. Okay, let's see if it'll let me share Kindle. It's not letting me share my Kindle for some reason. Oh, here we go. Okay. Unable to share. Okay. Update system permissions. Okay, whatever. Okay, so let me just, you know what? I'm going to go to Amazon.com and just type in Bob Wells, and his book will come up. Here it is. So let me reshare my screen. Bear with me through these little. Okay. Share screen. Bump, bump, bump. There we go. Okay. So here's the book. Wow, $0 on Kindle. Okay. But you can also buy it as a paperback. So right here is his book. How to Live in a Car, Van, or RV and Get Out of Debt, Travel, and Find True Freedom. Okay, so I feel like I'm reliving this again. Actually, I came off the road mainly because of debt, trying to start an online business. All my debt is from trying to start an online business and basically failing at it, to be honest. So I should reread this book, but you can look inside and just check it out. So I read this book from cover to cover, and I was convinced after I read it. It took me like, I don't know, 3 days. I just took a weekend and read through the whole thing and decided that I was going to get a van. I almost said get a man immediately. Get a van immediately. I just set my face like a flint, and that is exactly what I did. I went on Bob's forum, and there was a van for sale for $4,000. I didn't have $4,000, but I saw that van, and I knew that van was mine. And with great determination, I packed myself and my dog in my small Chevrolet Malibu, a little gold car, and I drove like I made a beeline straight for, I forget the name of the town. It's like Warrensburg or something. North Carolina. I could look it up, but I don't want to try to screen share and all that again. So I made a beeline straight down there, and the family, it was a guy who wanted to sell the van. He used it as like his escape van cave, and every so often he would escape into the forest with the van, but he was tired of it sitting in his driveway, and he just wanted to get rid of it. Very nice man. He let me spend the night in his driveway in the van, and I just knew that van was mine. Again, I did not have the $4,000 that he was asking. The next morning, I woke up, got out of the van, and we started talking, and his wife asked me about my car, and she wanted to know how many miles were on it, what condition it was in, and it was in very good condition. And I had literally just paid the car off like 2 weeks prior to coming down to look at the van. So it was all paid off, and she sat in it, and she drove it around, and she said, "Hey, why don't we just do a swap?" And I was like, totally gung-ho. So at the time, this van had 164,000 miles on it. This van that I'm in right now. And it was partially converted. It had the bed in it that I'm sitting in right now. It didn't have solar in it. It did have a battery bank connected to the alternator with an on-off switch. So the alternator could charge the battery, and I could get power that way. That was more of a short-term solution. But I knew I would have to do some work on the van, and I had no idea, had no construction skills whatsoever. I still don't. It's just not my thing. I know there's some people out there, men, women, non-binary people, All kinds of people out there with different skills. I mean, I've seen some incredible conversions. Mine's just kind of a cobbled together is kind of how I describe it. But it's functional, it's comfortable, and I love it. But let me just back up a little bit. So we made the swap, we made the trade, and I took off down the highway in the van. And I was actually a very nervous driver. I'd never driven such a big vehicle. It was a bit of a rough beginning. My van life was a very rough beginning, starting with a very touchy steering wheel, at least touchy to me. Now I'm just used to it. It's nothing now. It's like second nature driving her. But I had to go get, I went to Asheville to this little old VW shop, and they put in a bar to like prevent the steering wheel from wiggling so much and feeling so out of control. So I had that put in. I stayed with some friends for a few nights while that work was being done. And then I got back on the highway. This was in winter. This was December of 2012. And I wove my way back to Mount Storm, West Virginia, where I was living and working at the time. I was a motel manager, and I helped oversee a campground and lodge. And I was just so eager to get on the road, but I knew I had to pare down my life. I had to get rid of a lot of stuff, and I was actually living in a motel room. I had pared my life down enough so that I could live in a motel room with a dog. My dog, Rochelle Claire, a fox terrier mix. I'll show you a picture of her shortly. But so, yeah, I mean, I got rid of tons of things. I took loads and loads of things to the thrift store in Oakland, Maryland, which was like 45 minutes away from Mount Storm, or maybe more like half hour away, not that far away. So I made several trips. Finally, I emptied out the motel room. And then I had to work on like insulating the van because my goal was to cross the country. I was teaching online classes at the time, so I could totally be mobile. Like my work was online, so absolutely I could work remotely anywhere where I could get an internet connection. And gosh, at the time I was using Verizon's hotspot. No, Millennicom. I was using Millennicom's hotspot, and it was $70 a month for their service. So that enabled me to be able to work online anywhere where I could get a signal. And I think Millennicom was a Verizon, or still is a Verizon carrier. So I did my best to insulate the van. I did not do a very good job. I read through Bob's book. I read through the parts carefully about insulating the van. And then I heard someone else, another van lifer, say that you should put a layer of Reflectix. See this silver? Put a layer of that first, completely around the inside of the van. And I didn't do that. All I did was put foam core insulation. And so I literally had to start all over again. So it was a pretty rough beginning for me to fully convert the van. So once I had insulated the van with the foam core, this is still in Mount Storm, West Virginia, and I realized after I had done the work that I did it wrong. I really felt that having that Reflectix would help keep the moisture from the walls of the metal walls of the van, the metal skin. And so anyway, I ended up getting really frustrated, and I wanted to get to my parents' house in Wells, Minnesota. So from Mount Storm to Wells, Minnesota, I ended up packing the van to the gills, putting the dog in. She couldn't jump up, so I had to like lift her into the van. At the time, she could jump out at that time, and we headed out. Let me back up, just a little rewind story here. So there were some friends, or I thought they were friends, at the motel and campground, and they were new people. They were new, and one of them lived out of a bus. And I thought surely she'd be willing to help me convert the van. And they did nothing but ridicule me, like, "Oh, that space is too small." And like they came over to help one day, and they were just she and a friend or that was also living in the bus with her, and they just ridiculed me up and down. And I looked at them and I said, "You know what? I don't need your help. I don't need naysayers helping me. I know what I want with my life. Go away. I will do this myself." And they did. They left because I didn't need that kind of negative energy while I was doing my van build. So, yeah, maybe I did it all wrong from the get-go, and that's okay. People learn from their mistakes. Mistakes aren't the end and be all. They are learning opportunities for us to improve. So, packed the van to the gills, and finally the day came. I think I left on February 2nd, 2013. So I had spent all of January, the rest of December, all of January, packing up, getting ready for the journey west. So I get in the van with the dog and turn the key, and we leave Mount Storm and head down the highway. And, rough beginning. It's okay. But the van drove marvelously. 164,000 miles. She was mechanically sound. And actually, the guy that I swapped the van with, he was a mechanic. So he took really good care of the van before I had received it. So she was mechanically sound as we made our way down the highway. And after about 2 hours of driving, I hit a wall of fog, and it was the worst fog I had ever seen. I could not see at all, and I started panicking because it was dark. It was dusk or twilight. I get those two mixed up. Anyways, the sun had set, and it was just barely light out at thick fog. And suddenly in the distance, I see the Golden Arches, McDonald's. And so I make a beeline to the Golden Arches, and I pull in, and that's where I parked the rest of the night. Nobody told me to leave. Nobody told me to move. Thankfully. Gotta sneeze. Whew. Oh my goodness, that is memory lane right there. So now I'll never forget, the wind was howling, and I didn't have a very good pair of earplugs. The dog slept soundly like a baby. I, on the other hand, was awoken by, it sounded like an Indian Native American flute as the wind whistled through my gutters. I was at a certain angle with the wind in the parking lot, and it was kind of a magical experience too. It was kind of a spiritual, like I just heard this flute music all night long, just from the wind hitting my van gutters. I got up in the morning. I had like a McDonald's granola yogurt for breakfast. And I said, "Do you have any idea when this fog's going to lift?" And they shook their heads. And I got out there, and I decided to take the plunge and just go through the fog to see what I would see on the other side. So lo and behold, after about a half hour, 40 minutes of driving, I had driven out of the fog and was headed towards a friend's house in Ohio. So that was my first stop, and I stayed at their place for about a week. Really nice time, nice couple. I taught my online classes the Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. That was my schedule when I was teaching online. I gave myself a 4-day weekend, and then I taught 3 days a week online. And I taught with a now closed company online called 𝐬𝐡𝐢𝐬, which served homeschool kids with a la carte online classes. So my specialty was a unique course called Math Art, where we look at mathematics in art, history, literature, mathematics connections in nature, such as patterns in nature, the Fibonacci numbers, the golden ratio. So I created a whole year-long course called Math Art, and that was my most popular course, actually. The people just really love to see the connections that math has with the real world. And my other popular class was marine biology, but I did teach some other courses. I taught mammals, birds, botany, a course called Nature Connections. So yeah, that was how I supported myself for most of the 8 years that I lived on the road, until the market became really saturated, and I had a really hard time until eventually I just wasn't getting students for classes. And that's a story for another day. So I left Ohio, and it was bitter cold, February. And speaking of which, it has been quite cold here in the desert, unseasonably cold. Usually it's like bright, sunny, 60s, 70-degree weather here. We're at 2,000 feet here in Eastern California. So when I left Ohio, I had never overnighted in the camp when it was like below zero. And all across, I went through Chicago. Actually, I circumvented Chicago. I didn't want to go through the city. As I was crossing the Midwest, it was bitter cold. It was sub-zero temperatures. So I was afraid to overnight in those kinds of temperatures. Now, I did have a big buddy heater. I was afraid to use it. I had never used it before. You know, this is just a rough start here with van life as far as knowing how to utilize the van, right? So I hightailed it across the country. I drove across the country 17 hours. 17 hours it took me to get from Ohio, and I forget the name of the town where they lived, to Wells, Minnesota. The only thing I stopped for was to gas up. I think I did that 4 times to get across the country. So I arrive at my parents' house at 2 a.m., negative 13 degrees. I'm skating across their lawn, like trying to get to the door and find the 𝐜𝐸𝐻𝐷 key. And entered the house. I couldn't sleep. I was just so excited. Like, this was like the beginning of my van journey. And I remember taking a long hot bath, and the dog was running around excited, chasing the cat. They had a cat at the time named, what was her name? Chloe. No, not Chloe. I forget her name. She was a tabby. And the cat absolutely hated the dog. She would hiss at her, and Rochelle just had a blast chasing the cat around. And so I stayed at my parents' house for 3 months and taught my online classes and continued to save money to get back on the road. And my father actually helped me finish restart converting the van. We took the terrible job that I had done. We took the insulation off of the van walls, and we started from scratch, starting with the layer of Reflectix. We bought a giant roll of Reflectix, unrolled it, and used 2-sided tape to tape the Reflectix all the way around, completely around the van, starting from the cabin, like just behind that bar there that you see where I hang my curtain to slide across. So the Reflectix starts there and moves all the way back to the very back of the van. You could see, I was going to say you could see some Reflectix on the walls, but the lighting here is a little tough to see that. But trust me, the van is entirely lined with Reflectix. So, and then on top of that, let's see, I put Pink Panther fiberglass, which is not really ideal, but we put it over the long windows. I have a long window here and a long window behind these shelves. All my clothes here. There's another long window here. So we put a Pink Panther insulation over the windows, and then we put like a sheet over top, and then we put the insulation foam core over top of all that. And then finally, we overlaid it all with the Luan plywood, this here. So, and I, to this day, I have not changed very much about the how we converted the van. We also lifted the bed that I am right now sitting on. We lifted it so that I could actually store things underneath. The bed used to be much lower to the ground. So that was really necessary. It also came with this table that I'm covering right now. The dust cover is on it right now. So yeah, that was pretty much all we did. We insulated it really well, and it has made a huge difference. And that is probably the number one most important thing that you can do as a beginning vehicle dweller is insulate, insulate, insulate. You can't insulate too much because you will be in all manner of weather from freezing cold to sweltering hot, and you need to have your vehicle ready for that, for those weather changes. And it makes a world of difference. I knew one person, I won't mention her name here in case she ever stumbles over this live stream, this video here. She did not insulate her vehicle. So, but she would just chase around the perfect weather. But that's not practical. That is not practical at all. Because if you're ever sick and you are stuck in a freezing cold area or a sweltering hot climate, you need to just insulate. Have that insulation. Have it as thick as you can go. Okay, and there are videos out there on how to insulate a vehicle well for living full time. I also have, this fan was already put in, thankfully, and it works. It's worked after all these years. It still works even now. I don't need it on right now, but I'll just demonstrate. This is a Max Air fan. And it works beautifully. Okay. I'm just waiting for the blade to. So now I also overlay the fan with a no-seam screen because bugs like to get in through the fan. I know in Mammoth Lakes one year, oh my gosh, there was like an infestation of these flying ants, and they were going to the highest point, which happened to be my van's fan, and they were falling down on my head because I sit back there to do a lot of my online work, and it was really annoying. So I had to quickly get up there and put that netting, which solved the problem. They didn't continue falling on through the fan. So yeah, that was the beginning of, that was how I began my van life journey. So once my father and I finished converting the van, it was May of 2013, I hopped on the road and headed to Chino, Arizona. And I was meeting someone very special there. I was meeting Bob Wells. So I had reached out to Bob Wells online, and I asked him about, if he helped people get started. And he was more than eager. This was before he had the massive following that he has right now, where literally hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people follow his work and are coming on the road every single day probably now. But he invited me to join him and a small group of other nomads at his camp. And he taught me the ropes of how to begin living out of my camper van. So I left Wells, Minnesota, and it was like a 6-day trip from Wells, Minnesota to Chino, Arizona. So it's near the Prescott area, not far from Flagstaff. So we spent about a month in Chino in National Forest. And then we left and went to Williams, Arizona. And during that time, Bob helped me out with solar. I didn't have any solar yet. So he had an extra panel. So that allowed me to work without having to use my alternator charging system, which is not practical when you're sitting for several days at a time. So, yeah, I mean, it was just an incredible time in my life. It was very adventurous. And Bob is just the sweetest man on the planet. He's a real living saint, honestly. He'll probably be named a saint in the future, I think. But, he helped me get my start. I would cook breakfast for him, and he would just teach me different things about, where to get water in town, the cheapest water. And, but I had to come up with my own systems. Like how was I going to wash my dishes? How was I going to wash my hair? How was I going to bathe? So I, figured out pretty quickly how to stay clean because I didn't want to be grungy and gross. And there weren't any hot springs. But at that time, I was really missing a shower. So I did some surfing of the web, and I came across, I wonder if she still has her blog, RV Sue. So RV Sue and her canine crew. And it looks like she's stopped blogging, but I'll show you the blog here. She used to live, she looks like she still does. She lived out of a casita. And it looks like she still lives out of a casita pulled by a truck. So let me go ahead and screen share here again. Screen share. Okay. So I read RV Sue and her canine crew. And she likes little Jack Russells or terrier dogs. Not sure what. Anyway, so she had a blog post, and let me see if I can find them. I'll look over it later, but this is the blog. Oh, look, we can select a month. View post from June 2013 forward. Okay, so this was back in 2013. I'll just pick any random, what she has here. So, okay, never mind. But look at this beautiful view. So there's her casita. And she wrote some blog posts about Mammoth Lakes and the hot springs. And it really resonated with me. And I thought, I want to go there. I want to go where I can soak in my own personal hot spring. So, she described Mammoth Lakes and the mountains and all these different natural hot springs and how you can score your own pool and soak and get clean for free. And I just thought that sounded so luxurious. So I decided that I was going to visit Mammoth Lakes the following summer after RTR. So I began my route on the West Coast. So we went from Chico, we went to Williams, Flagstaff, Belmont, Arizona. Then I took off solo because I wanted to experience traveling as a solo female van lifer. So I took off by myself for Sedona, Arizona. I split off from the group, did my own thing. And then we rendezvoused together in Cottonwood, Arizona. And I remember just feeling like I just want to be alone. I just want to be alone and focus on my work. And, the group would gather around me. And yeah, it's great having friends on the road. But I was just in this stage in my life where I want to be alone, as Wonder Hussy says. I needed alone time. I needed time for just peaceful, quiet contemplation and just hunkering down. I wanted to build my online business to, be a long-term sustainable solution. At the time, I was relying on, 𝐜𝐴𝐚𝐳𝐷𝐾om to send me students, and I wanted to figure out a way to have my own business. And boy, that was a long haul to figure that one out. And that's a story for another day. So, but in a nutshell, that is how I began van life. So, just to leave you with a few tips, if you are considering beginning van life, look for vans like on Craigslist or locally or in your local surrounding towns. Ask friends and family. Many times there are friends and family that just want to offload an old van that, hopefully doesn't have too high a mileage on it. But hey, mine had 164,000 miles on it. Fords are really, highly reputable. So find a Ford van. I think they're just really reputable, really great running vehicles. Try to find it as low mileage as possible. Have a mechanic friend. Look at your van before you pay. um, just any friend that knows mechanics that can just make sure that you're not getting a lemon. Do a test drive, for, I don't know, 15, 20 minutes, see how it runs. Once you get your van, insulate, insulate, insulate. That is the most important thing. And you have to pretty much gut out the vehicle to do that. So be prepared to have someone help you if you need help to gut it out. Otherwise, go to good old YouTube and find out for your particular make and model how to gut it. And then insulate it with that first layer of Reflectix that will, prevent moisture from getting on the metal walls of the vehicle. So those are my few tips for how to begin van life. I hope you enjoyed that story. Go ahead in the comments, share your thoughts about today's story time, about how I began my van life journey. I'd love to hear from you, and I will answer your comments. Thank you for watching, and see you at tomorrow's live stream.